The takeaway, if you remember anything from this discussion today, is the following, which is written by Joe Mangano, the author of the report. Since the late 1980s, dramatic increases have occurred in Burke County death rates. Many factors can affect mortality, but adding 2 large nuclear reactors must be regarded as a major cause. In this report, we're looking at the 2 major reactors, which would be Plant Vogtle Units 1 and 2, which came online in 1987 and 1989 and continue to operate. So we have a before and after period from 1968 to 1987, before the reactors were in operation, and an after period from 1988 to 2020, a 2 or 3 decade extents for each reactor. Last year, the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League commissioned the Radiation Public Health Project to conduct a series of illness and death, that is, morbidity and mortality, in Burke County, Georgia. Joseph Mangano, the report's author, is an epidemiologist and executive director of the Radiation Public Health Project. Beside me here are graphs representing the findings of the report. Before Plant Vogtle Units 1 and 2 reactors went into operation, the death rate in Burke County was 19% above the United States rate. Here you can see that on the bottom graph is the blue bar to the left of the other bar. Those are death rates in Burke County, Georgia. Death rates overall, including cancer and other disease. After startup, the death rate in Burke County from all causes soared to 35% above the United States rate. And you can see that here in a close-up. The orange bar extends 35% above the US rate, which on the graph is marked as 0. So there's not that there's no effect in the US, there is an effect, but the baseline is provided to us by the United States morbidity and mortalities. So we're comparing the before and after with Vogtle Units 1 and 2 only for the purpose of determining the impacts possibly and what other impacts there may be. This change from 19% to 35% amounts to 1,223 excess deaths in Burke County from the years 1988 to the year 2020. The county to national ratio increased for both black and white populations. It was largest for younger and older residents. For example, infant mortality under the age of 1 year rose from 34% above the US rate to 79% above the US rate. I'll turn your attention to the graph above, the county death rate from all cancers. So we looked at just cancers from that same period. And as you can see, the green bar there is actually showing it goes below the 0% baseline for the United States levels of cancer. What that means is, since it was a negative number compared to the United States overall, it means that Burke County citizens were having less cancer than counties outside of Burke. Their health was in much better shape than overall nationally. So if the county death rate from all cancers rose from 7% below to 13% above the U.S. rate after the Vogtle startup. The Radiation Public Health Project report states that 303 of the 1,223 excess deaths were due to cancer. The change in cancer death rates from below to above the U.S. rate occurred for both races included in the study and all ages included within the study. The county's most recent incidence rate. Now, incidence is cancer which is not necessarily more fatal. County's most recent incidence rate of new cancer cases from 2016 to 2020 now ranks 16th highest compared with all 159 Georgia counties. This is a lottery we do not wish to win in Burke County. Annually, that means 150 Burke County residents are diagnosed with cancer. So is there a cause here? Is there an effect that can be connected? Like all nuclear power plants, Vogtle generates over 100 radioactive chemicals in the production of electricity. Each compound can cause cancer or other diseases. These compounds are not found in nature. They are, pardon the pun, man-made. They are created during a normal operation of a nuclear reactor. There's no way to prevent them that we know about. They are created during normal operation of nuclear reactors. Some of these radioactive particles and gases are released into the environment and can enter the body through breathing and the food chain. In addition to Vogtle Units 1 and 2, Vogtle is the site of 2 new reactors which are in fits and starts operating since July 23 and February of 24. Vogtle Units 3 and 4 are the only new U.S. nuclear reactors ordered and completed since 1973. Vogtle is the only U.S. nuclear power plant with 4 nuclear reactors. Burke County consists mostly of small towns and rural areas, as you well know. Its population of 24,596. Of that population, nearly half are African American. The county has a history of socioeconomic disadvantages. For example, its poverty rate is nearly double that of the U.S. rate. These negative impacts in the presence of 4 nuclear reactors raises issues of environmental justice and environmental racism. An average person might ask, why would radiation cause an increase in cancer or cancer death rates from other causes? Radiation released from nuclear reactors like those at Vogtle are all known to cause cancer based on many studies in the medical literature. Those who are most affected by exposure are the very young, the unborn, and children. Aside from cancer, several articles in the literature uncovered by Mr. Mangano find excess deaths and non-cancer causes among nuclear plant workers. A book that reviewed 5,000 articles of health trends near the Chernobyl reactor found excesses in multiple diseases, not just cancer, after the 1986 meltdown. That was some of the work of Dr. Yablokov and others, and is cited in the references to the Mangano report. One might ask, could other factors account for this death rate increases? Well, many factors can affect mortality, but the large increase before and after Vogtle startup indicates that radiation exposure likely played a major role in that trend. I'll say it again. Many factors can affect mortality, but the large increase before and after Vogtle startup indicates radiation exposure likely played a major role. People know that Burke County is also situated close to the Savannah River site, a nuclear weapons plant. However, the Savannah River site began operation in the 1950s, early 1950s. But for years after, the cancer death rate in Burke County was below the U.S. rate. It was only after the Vogtle startup that cancer rates began to be exceeded those of the United States. Another question might be asked is, will the two new Vogtle reactors increase the gap between Burke County and the U.S.? Will it increase the cancer and incidence and mortality rates? Adding two new reactors to the existing two will increase the amount of radioactivity released into the environment, and thus the gap between county and national death rates would be expected to increase. This is an example of environmental injustice because of the 94 reactors in the United States today. Burke County has one of the highest proportions of black residents. That, plus the fact that Vogtle is the only U.S. nuclear plant in history of the United States with 4 reactors, since most have only 1 or 2 and just 1 with 3, indicates a disproportionate burden on Burke County in general and specifically on African American populations living nearest the plant. So what are the recommendations? Based on the information in the Radiation Public Health Project report, we find the following 4. We call upon public officials, academic institutions, civic organizations, religious associations, public interest groups, and interested people everywhere to join in calling for the following measures. Public leaders, especially health officials, should review this report and conduct further analysis of trends in Burke County health status. The analysis, along with others on this list, should be presented to the public for comment. Number 2, further analyses should include assessments of environmental injustice and environmental racism in placing 2 nuclear power plants plus 2 more in the same location. Number 3, to review the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission's decision to grant license extensions for Vogtle Units 1 and 2, which allow operations to continue until 2047 and 2049, respectively, and revoke the extensions, which only begin in 2027 and 2029, the 40-year licensing period, and revoke the extensions until it can be determined that Plant Vogtle emissions have not harmed the health of Burke County residents. And number 4, it's time to assess the cumulative impacts posed by Plant Vogtle Units 1, 2, 3, and 4, and compare them with other sources of electricity now available, such as safe, economical, solar, and wind. The one thing that has changed is the contamination. And the Mangano report on page 10, table 2, points to the years 2008 to 2022 for the emissions coming from Plant Vogtle 1 and 2. In that period of time, tritium, which is radioactive hydrogen, releases increased from 127 curies to 293 curies. So the emissions over that period of time, 2008 and 2022, doubled the amount of tritium emitted into the atmosphere in Burke County. I think we agree. I think a thorough study is warranted, which would not be limited to the county line of Burke County. That does not seem fair to me, I think, but within different political subdivisions, people can do what they can do. For example, a Burke County Health Department or whatever. Academic institutions might serve that as well. The Savannah Riverside does emit contamination into the river. Plant Vogtle does emit radioactive contamination into the Savannah River. The Georgia EPD, until their funding was cut, recorded all those data, and so we had and separated them from what was coming from Savannah Riverside and what would be coming from Vogtle. So I don't know if those rates, how recent the most recent studies by EPD was, but last I heard they were not funded to do that. But while it was being studied, Georgia EPD found contamination contributed from both sides, and they found beta radiation extending down the Savannah River to Jasper County into the public water supply, both in raw water and finished water, both water before it's treated and after it's treated. Still high rates of beta radiation, which is attached to certain radioactive chemicals and having an impact in the public drinking water, 100 miles downstream. So there's more to this to be seen. This is what we have today.
The future analysis should include assessment and environmental injustice and environmental racism and the placing two nuclear power plants to more power plants. My question is, and first of all, I was born in Burke County but grew up in Augusta. And so I'm quite familiar with what has been going on. And my future is dependent on the future of who? Those who are younger than I am. So therefore, my idea of being in the area of Burke County and Augusta and working with as volunteer, I'm retired. Let me make that clear. I'm retired. So my working is what I just like doing. And I want to have the future because, see, I got 2 grandchildren. And I need to make sure my grandchildren and who lives out of this area, that they're protected, though they live in Atlanta. Even if Atlanta was having this problem, I would want to make sure that they were safe. So it doesn't matter where you are, it's a matter of what's happening in that community. And if it seems like it's an injustice thing, and you have to think about it. How many other areas that have put plants in your backyard? Because it's in your backyard, whether you realize it or not. Because when you go out the door here in Burke County and the air is coming, you have to realize when you look in the air and you see the clouds moving, and you have to realize that the wind is blowing, the sun is shining, and how much contamination is in it. But if you can have an opportunity to stop it, slow it down, do that. But whatever you do, don't increase it. And that's what you're saying in verse number 2. I said verse number 2 because I'm also a pastor. And so I don't went to preaching. So, but I want to preach the gospel that don't do nothing that you wouldn't want done to your own self. So you want to be safe in your own backyard. When you slumber and sleep, you want to be safe when you wake up. And I want that to happen with the children. And therefore, what I'm working on now with Richard Colclough and with others, with the concerned citizens of Shell Bluff, and we established that organization. It's now 14 years old. And what we established it was to make sure justice was being done. And that equal justice was going to be motivated. We wanted to make sure that the future lived in the children and invite the children to understand what they was living at. Invite the children to grow in 2 things. One of them was where you live at. And if we don't encourage them to live in the area they're born in, they're going to a bigger and better city. And now the next thing was to create an environment and to build up their education of wisdom and knowledge. Because if you don't have the knowledge and wisdom of education on what is contaminated and what is not contaminated, what is good and what is bad, you don't have a tendency to address it. And we want to address it with our children as they grow up to make sure that their community is realized. And we want to make sure that they develop and make sure they are participant and understanding how important it is to have the word of knowledge going in them. If it's wrong, let me back up. It doesn't care who they are. And I could care less whether you're black, white, blue, green, yellow, or whatever. If you are against one another, you're dangerous. You need to be in unity together and raising your children, raising your community, being able to put the children in a position. And even at the present time, we are having students to come from Payne College and ask them to work with us because I want them to be advised on what we are doing. And I want them also to realize that there's a thing called testing and how you can do it. You can do it by being involved. And I invite you to involve anybody that you want them to come to the Concerned Citizens of Shell Bluff and be a part of that organization. We pay nobody. So if you want to be a volunteer, that's the only way you're going to be there. Because we don't have a salary to pay you, but you have a life to live. And your life to live is going to pay you your salary because you'll be able to learn how to live in an environment where you may be being endangered with contamination. And you want to live to that expectations. So provide assistance and also support those who elected. I work with another organization. They asked me, they weren't able to come today, the Richmond County Neighborhood Associations Allowance. And we are very active in anyone who's running for a political office. Matter of fact, we were just here in Waynesboro when you were running for a sheriff in district attorney. And we were able to be there. Because what we do, we want to make sure if you are against the community you're running against, we're going to talk with you. And we'll tell you, well, we're going to support you. But if you do not support the community with justice, we're going to be just as hard getting you out of office as you're trying to get in office. If we make that crystal clear, am I right, Richard? And that's why we are now. And we're very proud to see our mayor at the president's speech the other night. The mayor came to our organization. And that's what we do. If you're justice, have righteousness, being a servant for one another, we're going to support you. And I would tell them, now if we find out at the end of the day, as the kids can say, and you did something different, and you went against what you promised to do, we are going to do everything we can to remove you. Because you was not honest with us. It's about being honest and upright and being respected. Because you can get the things done if you do what you say you're going to do and have the power to do it, but yet you don't do it, then we're coming after you. And even though I work with Plant Vogtle, I want you to know that too. Because Plant Vogtle helps us, we like to make sure that communities are able to exist and have homes that are economically taken care of, and also have homes that are energy efficiency. So what we do is Plant Vogtle was helping us to restore homes. And they know how I feel about anything, because I'm going to be upright with you. And they agreed that they would help us to make sure that widows, those who are unfortunate and have a need, they would help us to meet those needs. And I'll say something, they did it. And at the same time, we were telling them, you need to stop that factory out there too. So we tell them everything, and that's why I'm telling you why we stand. We're going to tell you what you're doing right. We're going to tell you what you're doing wrong. Because at the end, I want you to understand that I'm going to always say, because I've got one thing in my mind, and that is I've got to do what I feel the Spirit of God is telling me to do and to say what I need to say. And I'm going to say it, and I want to be crystal clear that what am I saying is not that I'm saying it because I'm against anybody. I'm saying it because it's justice, it's equal, And it's for all people, irregardless of who you may be, irregardless of where you come from, irregardless of who your parents or grandparents was. You are the one in charge. And you got a life to live. And I want you to live that life being an active servant, doing what is pleasing in your own community, being guided by the spirit of being justified and righteous. And that's how I want to say, Lou, that as if we work together, and that's how I met Lou Zeller, by working in what I'm doing. That's how I met right here, the various organizations, because of what you do. You get recognized for doing what's right. And I tell everybody, I invite you to McEmurray Spring Branch Baptist Church, because that's the home where I am. The Lord sent me to pastor. And I'm going to be there until the Lord said, Charles, it's time to go. So that's what I'm about. And I want you all to know that. So if anybody have any questions for Lou or for myself, I'll entertain it by answering your questions to the best of my ability, or I will ask you to give me a call and give me a contact information to get with you, and we'll do what we can to make sure that we're doing what you think is justified and equal justice, and doing the things that we will not keep repeating things that hinder and hurt the future, which is through our children. And that's the thing caught my attention when I realized the difference in the age of a child not reaching age 1. The height of those children has been passed away. And we need not to have that happen. That's all I have. Thank you.